May 26, 1941. 19:10 hours. The North Atlantic Ocean, 690 nautical miles west of Brest, France. A low, bruised sky presses down on a sea of furious gray peaks and deep rolling troughs. The wind howls at a near gale force 8, whipping spray from the waves into a stinging horizontal rain. On the bridge of the German battleship Bismarck, Admiral Gunther Lutyens watches the ocean churn. His ship, a 50,000-ton Titan of modern naval engineering, slices through the water at 20 knots, a plume of white foam boiling at her bow. For 2 days, she has been the most hunted vessel on the planet. After her stunning victory over the pride of the Royal Navy, HMS Hood, in the Denmark Strait, Bismarck became target number 1 for the entire British home fleet. Now she is running, a solitary steel predator seeking the sanctuary of the French coast. The crew is exhausted, running on adrenaline and the grim satisfaction of their recent triumph. But the Atlantic is vast, and their pursuers are relentless. Lutyens knows that safety lies just over a day's steaming away. If they can evade detection under this cloak of abysmal weather, they might just make it. The ship's state-of-the-art Fumo 23 radar sweeps the horizon, but in this sea state it is nearly useless, its display a blizzard of noise from wave clutter. The stakes are absolute. For the Kriegsmarine, Bismarck represents the future of naval warfare, a promise of German power projected across the globe. For the British, her destruction is a matter of national survival and vengeance. Every ship, every aircraft the Royal Navy can spare is converging on this patch of violent ocean, all guided by a singular imperative: find and destroy the Bismarck before she can disappear. What no one on Lutyens's bridge could possibly imagine is that their fate would not be decided by a rival battleship's massive guns, but by a handful of obsolete aircraft, so fragile and slow they seem to belong to a bygone era. The German battleship Bismarck was more than just a ship. It was a statement. The lead vessel of her class, she and her sister Tirpitz were the largest and most powerful warships ever built for the Kriegsmarine. Her construction was a direct and flagrant repudiation of the Treaty of Versailles, which had neutered the German Navy after the Great War. Laid down in 1936 at the Blohm and Voss shipyard in Hamburg, she was a physical embodiment of Germany's rearmament and resurgent ambition. Her specifications were formidable, designed not for fleet-on-fleet actions, which Germany could not win, but for the crucial task of commerce raiding. She was built to be a self-sufficient fortress, capable of breaking into the open Atlantic and systematically dismantling the convoys that were Britain's lifeline. Her main armament consisted of 8 15-inch SK C-34 guns in 4 twin turrets, capable of hurling a 1,800-pound armor-piercing shell over 20 nautical miles. Her secondary armament was a dense collection of 12. 5.9-inch guns, 16 4.1-inch anti-aircraft guns, and dozens of smaller-caliber automatic cannons. But her true strength lay in her protection. An immense armor belt, up to 320 millimeters or nearly 13 inches of Krupp cemented steel, shielded her vital machinery and magazines. Her decks were layered with up to 120 millimeters of armor to defeat plunging shells and aerial bombs. The design philosophy was one of extreme survivability, with a complex system of watertight compartments intended to contain any damage. German naval doctrine, under Grand Admiral Erich Raeder, envisioned surface raiders like Bismarck and the battlecruisers Scharnhorst and Gneisenau as the tip of the spear in the war against British supply. Operation Rheinübung, Bismarck's first and only mission, was the operational expression of this doctrine. Accompanied by the heavy cruiser Prinz Eugen, her objective was to slip past British patrols, evade the home fleet, and then run rampant among the unprotected merchant convoys. The sinking of HMS Hood on May 24th was a shocking confirmation of Bismarck's power, but it was also a tactical error. It alerted the entire Royal Navy to her exact position and transformed a raiding mission into a desperate flight. The British response was immediate and overwhelming. The sinking of the Hood, a beloved symbol of British sea power for 2 decades, was a wound to the nation's psyche. Prime Minister Winston Churchill issued a simple, stark order: sink the Bismarck. From every corner of the North Atlantic, British naval assets began to converge. Admiral Sir John Tovey, commanding the home fleet, pursued from the northwest with his flagship HMS King George V and the carrier HMS Victorious. From Gibraltar, Force H under Admiral James Somerville steamed north at flank speed with the battlecruiser HMS Renown and the aircraft carrier HMS Ark Royal. Cruisers like HMS Norfolk and HMS Suffolk, which had first shadowed Bismarck through the Denmark Strait, hung on her flanks, reporting her position. The hunt was a complex three-dimensional chess match played out over millions of square miles of unforgiving ocean. For a terrifying 31 hours, the British lost contact after Bismarck executed a brilliant tactical turn. The battleship seemed to have vanished. The Admiralty in London grew frantic. If she reached the protection of Luftwaffe air cover off the French coast, she would be nearly impossible to engage. The chase was re-energized by a single stroke of luck. A coastal command Catalina flying boat, piloted by an American naval observer, Ensign Leonard B. Smith, spotted the battleship on the morning of May 26th. The hunt was on again, but time was running out. The British battleships were low on fuel, and the weather was worsening. The only asset capable of reaching and, crucially, slowing Bismarck down was Admiral Somerville's Force H, and specifically the aircraft carrier HMS Ark Royal. On her flight deck sat the instrument of Bismarck's doom, the Fairey Swordfish torpedo bomber. By the standards of 1941, the Swordfish was an antique. A large, single-engine biplane, its structure was a mix of metal tubing and wood, all covered by a taut fabric skin. Its 2-man crew, a pilot and a telegraphist air gunner, sat in open cockpits, exposed to the elements. Its fixed undercarriage dragged through the air, limiting its top speed to a leisurely 139 miles per hour when not carrying ordnance, a speed slower than the top speed of the warship it was sent to attack. Its crews affectionately and mockingly called it the string bag, a reference to a type of shopping bag that could carry almost anything. The nickname was apt. The Swordfish was a versatile workhorse capable of reconnaissance, anti-submarine patrols, and, most importantly, carrying a single 18-inch Mark 13 torpedo weighing 1,010 pounds. Despite its anachronistic appearance, the string bag possessed qualities that made it a surprisingly effective naval weapon. Its low stall speed allowed it to operate from the short, pitching decks of early aircraft carriers in weather that would ground more modern high-performance monoplanes. Its simple, rugged construction made it reliable and easy to maintain at sea. Its very slowness, a disadvantage in a dogfight, became an asset in a torpedo run against a fast-moving ship, making it a stable and accurate launching platform. Its pilots were some of the most skilled and bravest in the Fleet Air Arm, trained to press their attacks at wave-top height, flying directly into a storm of defensive fire to guarantee a hit. The Swordfish had already proven its worth, most famously in the audacious raid on the Italian fleet at Taranto in November 1940, where a small force of the biplanes crippled 3 battleships at anchor. But attacking a warship underway, in a gale, defended by some of the most advanced anti-aircraft fire control in the world, was a different proposition entirely. It was a mission bordering on suicidal, yet for the Royal Navy it was the only option left. The fate of the chase now rested on the fabric-covered wings of these improbable aircraft. The flight deck of HMS Ark Royal was a scene of controlled chaos. At 19:15 on May 26th, Captain Loban Mond gave the order to launch. The carrier, herself a veteran of numerous campaigns, pitched and rolled violently, her bow disappearing into green water before rising again to send sheets of spray across the deck. A 40-knot wind screamed across the flight path. For the pilots and air gunners of 810, 818, and 820 naval air squadrons, this was the moment of truth. Clad in heavy gear, they climbed into their open cockpits, the freezing rain and salt spray lashing their faces. The Bristol Pegasus radial engines coughed to life, their roar a counterpoint to the gale. The first wave of 15 Swordfish, led by Lieutenant Commander Eugene Esmond, was to attack with torpedoes. One by one the biplanes taxied into position, their wings folded back for clearance, then spread and locked. Deck crews wrestled with the aircraft, struggling to keep them from sliding on the slick, moving surface. The launch was an act of supreme airmanship. Each pilot had to time his takeoff perfectly, waiting for the ship's bow to rise on a swell to gain a precious few feet of altitude. They lumbered down the short deck, engines at full power, and dipped precariously towards the waves before clawing their way into the thick gray clouds. Visibility was less than a mile. They formed up and headed towards Bismarck's last known position, guided by Ark Royal's radar. What followed was a near disaster that underscored the brutal difficulty of their task. Flying through layers of cloud and rain, the strike force relied on their ASV Mark II radar to find their target. They soon got a contact. Believing it to be the Bismarck, Esmond ordered the attack. The Swordfish descended from the clouds, lined up their target, and 11 aircraft dropped their torpedoes. Only then, through a break in the weather, did they see the unmistakable silhouette of the British cruiser HMS Sheffield, which had been sent ahead to shadow the German battleship. The attack was on a friendly ship. A wave of horror and relief washed over the pilots. Fortunately, the torpedoes had been fitted with new, unreliable magnetic detonators. Several detonated prematurely on hitting the rough sea, and the others that ran true failed to explode. The error was a blessing in disguise. It revealed the critical flaw in the detonators, and it alerted the British commanders to the danger of misidentification in the confusion of the chase. The chastened Swordfish crews returned to Ark Royal, landing in even worse conditions than when they had departed. They had failed, but they had learned a vital lesson. The armorers worked feverishly to rearm the remaining aircraft with the older, but far more reliable, contact-fused Mark XIII torpedoes. As dusk began to settle, a second strike of 15 Swordfish was readied. This time there would be no mistakes. The weight of the entire operation now fell on this final, desperate attack. At 20:47, the second wave of 15 Swordfish lifted off from Ark Royal's heaving deck. Eugene Esmond was again in the lead. This time, the pilots were explicitly warned about the presence of HMS Sheffield. They flew into the deepening twilight and the worsening storm, a small swarm of fabric and wire pitted against a steel behemoth. On the bridge of the Bismarck, lookouts scanned the horizon, their eyes straining in the poor light. The ship's formidable anti-aircraft batteries were on high alert. Her gunnery officers knew that an air attack was their greatest threat. As the Swordfish approached, guided by Sheffield, they finally broke through the low cloud base. Below them they saw it. Bismarck, carving a white wake through the dark water, already firing. The sky erupted in a latticework of red and white tracer. Fire. Black puffs of flak from the 4.1-inch guns blossomed around the slow-moving biplanes. From the German perspective, the attacking aircraft seemed impossibly fragile, like moths fluttering into a furnace. Captain Ernst Lindemann directed the fire, ordering hard maneuvers to throw off the attackers' aim. The ship heeled over, its guns blazing. The Swordfish pilots pressed their attack, descending to just 50 feet above the waves. This tactic, known as an anvil attack, involved groups of planes approaching from different bearings simultaneously, forcing the target ship to choose which threat to engage. It was incredibly dangerous, forcing the pilots to fly through a crossfire of their own. Inside his cockpit, Lieutenant Commander Esmond focused on his approach, the noise of his engine, the wind, and the percussive blasts of exploding shells, a deafening roar. He could see the streams of tracer fire reaching for his aircraft. The pilots weaved, using the troughs of the giant waves to mask their final approach. They had to get within 1,000 yards to have any chance of a successful launch. One by one, they released their torpedoes, the heavy ordnance dropping into the sea with a splash before beginning its deadly run. 2 Swordfish were hit by flak, but managed to limp back to the carrier. The rest turned away, their mission complete, leaving the fate of their torpedoes to physics and fortune. 2 critical hits were reported by the returning air crews. The first torpedo, likely from a Swordfish of 820 squadron, struck Bismarck's port side amidships, hitting the main armor belt. The explosion sent a shudder through the vessel and caused some minor flooding, but the thick Krupp steel held. It was a testament to the ship's incredible protection. The damage was superficial. For a moment, it seemed the attack had failed. But the second torpedo, launched by a Swordfish that pressed its attack against the stern, found the battleship's Achilles heel. It struck the port side of the stern, near the rudder assembly, while the ship was in the middle of a hard turn to evade. The 400-pound Torpex warhead detonated with catastrophic force against the unarmored, vulnerable section of the hull. The explosion did more than just tear a hole in the ship. The blast wave twisted the massive port rudder, jamming it hard against its housing at an angle of 12 degrees. It also damaged the central rudder, locking it in place. The immediate effect was felt all over the ship. On the bridge, the helmsman desperately spun the wheel, but it had no effect. The rudder angle indicators were frozen. Captain Lindemann ordered engines to be used for steering, a difficult maneuver at the best of times. By alternating the speed of the port and starboard propellers, he hoped to force the ship back on course. But in the raging gale, the maneuver was impossible. The wind and waves caught Bismarck's massive hull and, with her rudders jammed, pushed her into an uncontrollable, continuous turn to port. The ship that was built to command the seas was no longer under the command of her own crew. Admiral Lutyens quickly understood the gravity of the situation. The ship was unmaneuverable, sailing in a large, slow circle, heading not towards the safety of France, but back towards the northwest, directly into the path of Admiral Tovey's pursuing battleships. The damage was fatal. Not because it was sinking the ship, the flooding was controllable, but because it had robbed her of her ability to flee. The giant was crippled, chained to a small patch of the Atlantic, awaiting the arrival of her executioners. Damage control teams worked heroically in the flooded stern compartments, trying to access the rudder machinery. Divers were sent over the side in the violent sea in a futile attempt to cut the jammed rudder away with explosive charges. All efforts failed. The sea was too rough, the damage too severe. A profound sense of doom settled over the ship. Lutyens, a fatalist by nature, knew the end was near. Just before midnight, he transmitted a final, defiant message to German Naval Command. "Ship unmaneuverable. We will fight to the last shell. Long live the Führer." The trap, sprung by the antiquated Swordfish, was now closing. Throughout the night, British destroyers, led by the indomitable Captain Philip Vian, harried the crippled Bismarck, launching torpedo attacks and illuminating her with star shells, ensuring she could not escape and further exhausting her crew. At dawn on May 27th, the silhouettes of HMS King George V and the heavy battleship HMS Rodney appeared on the horizon. They had caught their prey. The final battle was a brutal, one-sided affair. Bismarck, unable to steer, could not bring all her guns to bear effectively or maintain a proper range. The British battleships systematically pounded her into a blazing wreck. Her own gun crews fought back with remarkable discipline, but their fire control was soon knocked out. By 10, Bismarck was a ruin, her superstructure ablaze, her guns silent. Yet she would not sink. Her robust construction kept her afloat. Finally, after being struck by hundreds of shells and several more torpedoes, the German crew scuttled the ship to prevent her capture. At 10:39, the once mighty Bismarck capsized and slipped beneath the waves, taking with her more than 2,100 men, including both Admiral Lutyens and Captain Lindemann. Only 115 survived. The sinking of the Bismarck was a pivotal moment in the Battle of the Atlantic, but its true significance lay in how her end was engineered. The final, brutal shelling by King George V and Rodney was merely the coup de grace. The battle was won, and the ship's fate was sealed the moment a single torpedo from a fabric-covered biplane jammed her rudder. The event was a shocking demonstration of the shifting balance of naval power. It proved that a battleship, no matter how powerful, was fatally vulnerable without control of the air above it. The ability of a carrier, operating over the horizon, to project power and cripple a superior surface combatant was now undeniable. The Swordfish, an aircraft considered obsolete at the start of the war, had delivered a blow that the most powerful guns of the Royal Navy could not have landed on a fleeing target. This singular event foreshadowed the future of naval warfare. In less than a year, Japanese carrier aircraft would sink the British battleships HMS Prince of Wales and HMS Repulse at Sea, and the United States Navy's carrier fleet would decisively halt Japanese expansion at the Battle of Midway. The era of the battleship as the unquestioned queen of the seas was over. The humbling of the great Bismarck by the slow, fragile string bag was not merely the end of one ship's story, but a clear and final verdict on the supremacy of naval air power.